What's going on, guys? MMA Outlaw back here with another video, and today you see Movsar Evloev on the left-hand side of the screen, and you see a white box on the right-hand side of the screen. And we are going to be going through every single important fight and removing that white box to reveal their next opponent. We are also at the end going to have our portion of the UFC chopping block. Every fighter that should be cut after this weekend, UFC London, Evloev versus Murphy at the O2 Arena. And so, Movsar Evloev, in his next matchup, he should be fighting Alexander Volkanovski. And I know that this was not a great fight for Movsar Evloev. I know that people are saying Lerone Murphy actually won the fight, and I do believe that this fight should have been a draw, but in the world that we're living in, we saw Cyril Gane when he actually lost to Volkov, right? And the judges gave it to Cyril Gane, and Dana White was like, Volkov, I'll make it right to you. And Cyril Gane ended up getting a title shot. And so we know that this happens over and over again, where there may be decisions we disagree with, but still the opportunity is going to go to the guy who won it on the judges' scorecards. And to be honest, Evloev did look better in the 4th and 5th round. Evloev did win the 3rd round, and without the point deduction, Evloev would have won the fight. And I do believe that Evloev is a tougher matchup for Volk. But, to be honest, after watching that fight, I think Alexander Volkanovski absolutely dismantles both of those guys. It doesn't matter who he fights. But nonetheless, a solid performance from Movsar Evloev, and Movsar Evloev will draw Alexander Volkanovski in a title fight. I know Dana White was non-committal about giving this fight to Movsar. I would be okay seeing Gene Silva fight Volk, but we know that Movsar at this point is the rightful contender. He's beaten Diego Lopez. I know that was on 4 days' notice for Diego, but Volkanovski, he's going to dismantle Movsar, and I believe that does a lot for Volk's legacy. I believe Gene Silva can fight Alexander Volkanovski after this matchup, and Evloev was trying to turn it around quick. I know Evloev was like, I'll be ready for May. And I think that's actually too quick of a turnaround for Evloev. And I saw Volk talking, and Volk was like, give me Evloev in July or August. And I think that would be a great timeline for Movsar Evloev versus Alexander Volkanovski for the featherweight belt. I think the UFC is rooting for Evloev to get absolutely dismantled in this belt opportunity if he does end up getting it. And so Volk versus Movsar, that's the fight to make. And moving onward, we have Lerone Murphy. Who should Lerone Murphy be fighting after his loss? He should be fighting Kevin Vallejos. And I know this is a tough turntable from Lerone Murphy, who is, a round-ish away from being the guy who was fighting Volk for the title, and now he's fighting the young up-and-comer. And I know in that last fight when Vallejos just was coming off that win, he was calling out Yair Rodriguez. I know in my last video I said, give me Vallejos versus Yair. But I believe Yair doesn't even get the opportunity to fight someone as good as Kevin Vallejos. I think Yair should have to fight an even worse prospect, and I think Yair would still lose. I want to see Yair get grapple fucked. I hate Yair Rodriguez. Never fights against the top-level contenders. Only wants to fight against guys who he has a favorable matchup against. And so give me Kevin Vallejos versus Lerone Murphy. I really do believe that's the fight to make. I think Vallejos looked absolutely wonderful in his last opportunity. I think Lerone Murphy is a little bit of a boring guy, and Vallejos is incredibly marketable. If Vallejos beats Lerone Murphy, we could absolutely see that Vallejos versus Gene Silva rematch. I really want to see Gene Silva versus. I'm hoping that maybe Volk would retire after beating a guy like Evloev. Vallejos gets a big win against Lerone Murphy, and then bang, UFC vacant title for the featherweight belt. Kevin Vallejos versus Gene Silva. That fight will be absolutely incredible. Vallejos, we all know he lost to Gene Silva on the Contender Series, but it was an incredibly close competitive fight, about as competitive of a fight that anyone has had with Gene Silva, obviously other than Diego Lopez, who was able to take Gene Silva out. But give me Kevin Vallejos. He absolutely dismantled Josh Emmett. I would love to see him versus Lerone Murphy, and I do believe that he would win this fight here. And so, moving onward, who should Luke Riley face next? And give me David Onama versus Luke Riley. David Onama is coming off of a big loss to Steve Garcia, getting KO'd. But Onama is all action, all gas, no breaks, is willing to come forward, lay it all on the line. As we saw in that fight, we saw David Onama go to war with Nate Landwehr. But that shows us David Onama is a very beatable guy, and Onama is ranked 14th in the featherweight division. I think this is an opportunity for Luke Riley to slowly build himself into the rankings. I understand if they want to give him a lesser fighter than Onama, but I think Onama is very beatable for a guy who's as tactical, for a guy who has as clean of striking as Luke Riley. And I think it's time that we start to kind of build London's next star. And I do believe that Luke Riley could be that. And so I think a great bout for Luke Riley in his career, a great bounce back spot for Onama as well. Onama has the opportunity to spoil a prospect, take his O, and bounce back from a big loss to Steve Garcia. And so give me Luke Riley versus David Onama. I do believe Luke Riley would get the job done, but I believe it would be an incredibly close fight. And so moving onward, Michael Venom Page, the one and only MVP, off of an absolutely horrible performance versus Sam Patterson, landing 33 significant strikes throughout the entire course of the fight. The fight was incredibly boring, but MVP has looked great in his UFC career. He has, I'm drawing a blank on who his one loss is to Ian Gary. His only loss in the UFC is to Ian Gary, and that was an incredibly close fight at that. And so who should MVP be fighting? Leon Rocky Edwards. Now, you could not tell me that MVP versus Leon in England would not feed families. Honestly, I don't even care about the rankings of these guys. Two Englishmen who are incredible strikers. I want to see them go at it. I'm tired of MVP getting these boring fights. He's having boring fights nonetheless, right? This is on him to try to start to change the tide, change the narrative on who the one and only MVP is, because we've seen in Bellator the crazy flying knees, the big right hands. But I think Leon Edwards has a showcase spot versus MVP. Leon could potentially take MVP down, kind of pick him apart from the outside with his leg kicks, and MVP could use that in-and-out karate style. And I think this is a fight that the English fans would love to see this. This could absolutely headline a fight night in the O2 Arena. You know, I would be very, very happy if this matchup was made. I don't believe that this is the matchup that will get made. I understand not wanting to reward MVP for boring performances, but MVP versus Leon Edwards, that fight would be an absolute scrap. You just know that's going to be a banger. And so, moving onward, what is next for Christian Leroy Duncan? CLD, Christian Leroy Duncan. What's next for him? Jared Cannonier. And I know this is not the most exciting matchup, but CLD, we've seen him lose to a guy like Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez. We've seen CLD have great moments, spinning back fist KOs, 2 of them in the UFC. He looked dynamic on the feet versus oh my God, who did he just? I don't even know why I'm drawing. Roman Dolidze. I don't know why I was drawing a blank on who he fought last night. Roman Dolidze. But he did look like he could get grappled. He did look like a 5-round fight would maybe bother him. And so I think Christian Leroy Duncan's next matchup has got to be against the killer gorilla in Jared Cannonier. Jared Cannonier has that 5-round experience. We've seen Jared Cannonier beat a guy like RoboCop because of that 5-round experience. I would love to see how CLD would, kind of work in a 5-round fight in an Apex main event versus Jared Cannonier. I think that would be a great fight, potentially the co-main event of that MVP Leon Edwards, UFC fight night. But I would love for this fight to be 5 rounds because I think CLD in 3 rounds would easily win this one. But I do believe over the course of 5 rounds, Jared Cannonier's pace, his pressure could really make this fight an interesting one. And could he potentially even use his wrestling? And so I don't know who I would take in this fight. I lean CLD, but I think this would be a great fight, a fight that the fans definitely want to see, and a one that could actually move CLD's career forward. And so, moving onward, Roman Dolidze. Who does Roman Dolidze get after getting cooked by CLD? Roman Dolidze gets Ateba Gutierrez. I know Ateba Gutierrez is fighting Ozzy Diaz on this upcoming card in Newark, New Jersey, on the Khamzat Chimaev card. And after Ateba Gutierrez absolutely dismantles Ozzy Diaz, we got to start giving Ateba Gutierrez some real fights in the UFC. And that starts with a guy like Roman Dolidze. Roman Dolidze is an incredibly talented grappler. And so you know that if Roman Dolidze gets Ateba Gutierrez to the ground, he is going to have an incredibly good performance. You know that. We've seen him control CLD. We've seen him dispose of Jack Hermanson. I know Jack Hermanson is not that great, but you've even seen him go 4 rounds with Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, and Fluffy controlled that fight, yes, but making it 4 rounds when Fluffy is putting that pace on you is incredibly difficult. And Ateba Gutierrez versus Roman Dolidze in a 3-round fight, that would be a great fight to watch. This gives Ateba Gutierrez an opportunity to move up into the rankings in the middleweight division. And I do believe what we saw from CLD is that Roman Dolidze is there to get tagged against an explosive fighter like Ateba Gutierrez. I do believe Ateba could easily dispose of Roman Dolidze. And I think this is the fight. Hardcore fans, hardcore UFC fans, you would love this matchup. You know, Ateba Gutierrez is always going to try and go to war. Really a striker versus grappler matchup at its finest. And if this fight were made, I'd be thrilled. Ateba Gutierrez by KO, absolutely. And so moving onward, the last fight that we're going to make is a fight with the last Kingsman, or formerly known as the Prospect, Nathaniel Wood. Who does Nathaniel Wood get? Off of a big win against Kita, Nathaniel Wood gets the boy who's got slept in 2 seconds against Kevin Vallejos, Josh Emmett. I do believe that this would be an incredibly interesting fight for all UFC fans to watch. You know, Josh Emmett comes swinging in with those big overhands and those big meaty hooks. And Nathaniel Wood is an incredibly technically sound fighter. Doesn't have that much power, but you saw some of that lighter man skill, a former bantamweight in Nathaniel Wood coming off of a big win against Kita, a very, very close fight at that. But I do believe Nathaniel Wood is 11-3 now in the UFC. I believe he's on a 6-fight winning streak. With his last loss, I believe, coming against, maybe it was against Muhammad Naimov, and Naimov cheated so much in that fight to win that fight, grabbing the fence, doing all different types of stuff. And so Nathaniel Wood on a 5 or 6 fight win streak absolutely deserves a move up in competition. He was willing to take on Keita with no problem. Keita literally is the most feared prospect at featherweight coming into the UFC. It speaks volumes that the UFC gave a 10-3 fighter, a guy making his UFC debut, and Keita was able to hang in there with him. But I do believe Nathaniel Wood very clearly wins round 1 and 3, and just, you know, being a company man, taking a fight like that, I believe you deserve a guy who, I believe Josh Emmett is 14 or 15 now in the rankings. He deserves a guy in Josh Emmett who is ranked, having won 6 in a row. It's time we start Nathaniel Wood moving upward in the featherweight division. And so that concludes all of the matchups that we are going to make today. And we're just going to do a quick speed run through them. We got Movsar Evloev versus Alex Volkanovski. We got Lerone Murphy versus Kevin Vallejos. We got Luke Riley versus David Onama. That would be a banger. We got Michael Venom Page versus Leon Edwards. That should be a UFC Fight Night main event in the London O2 Arena. That would be a banger. Striker's delight. And then we got CLD in a 5-round main event, or potentially a co-main event of that London headliner. I would love to see the Killer Gorilla go at it with CLD. That would be a great matchup. And then we got Roman Dolidze feeding into Ateba Gutierrez. Ateba Gutierrez deserved this move up in competition. We can't have him keep smashing cans. And then lastly, we got Nathaniel Wood versus Josh Emmett. So that's all the matchups that we're going to make for today. And so that jumps us into this week's episode of the UFC chopping block, this portion of the UFC chopping block. In this portion of the video, we're going to be going over every single fighter who fought this weekend who should be chopped or getting cut after this weekend. And so you're going to see these 3 white boxes right behind me. What are these 3 white boxes for? These 3 white boxes are 3 fighters that should be cut after their performance. And so the first one, Austin Lane. And as we go through these guys, I'm going to show you their Tapology page. Oh my God. You can only see the results here on this. This is a loss. Left hook, ground and pound. Rear naked choke. Right hook. won that unanimous decision against Robelis Despain just by wrestling. Hanato Deniz, left hook KO. Justin Tafa, KO. Getting KO'd by Justin Tafa. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? That is not good to see from Austin Lane. 1-5 in the UFC. Been finished in all 5 of his losses. Austin Lane, you have been chopped. And so, moving onward, who's the next fighter that's getting cut? Ravina Oliveira. Let's check out Ravina's career. 0-3 in the UFC. You see this unanimous decision. Loss to Lisboa. Rear naked choke. Submission loss to Stephanie Luciano. And Chanel Dreyer KOing her in that last fight. You know, Ravina Oliveira, UFC strawweight finishes, they don't happen that often. And she's been finished twice in the UFC. She is 0-3 in the UFC. Ravina Oliveira, you have been chopped. And so, who's the last fighter on the chopping block? Antonio Tricoli. And let me say, Tricoli's going to have no problem with this one. Tricoli is what, 0-4 in the UFC? Let's check out his Tapology page. 0-4 in the UFC. And a no contest on the Contender Series as well. Let's look at this. Left hook, standing guillotine, and a decision. He lost to Trayshawn Gore, Shara Magomedov, Mansour Abdul Malik, and Montas in his last fight. And so Tricoli, he's a professional poker player. It doesn't even matter to him. He's got bigger fish to fry. He's got to keep that brain intact. But Antonio Tricoli, you have been chopped from the UFC, absolutely cut. And so let's just run through that once more. Who are the 3 fighters on the chopping block for this week's episode of the UFC chopping block? We got Austin Lane, we got Ravina Oliveira, and we got Antonio Tricoli. The 3 of you guys have all been chopped. You guys are cut from the UFC. And so if you enjoy content just like this, make sure that you like and subscribe. Let me know what the matchups you think should be made after UFC London in the O2 Arena, and let me know who you think should be cut after this weekend. And so, again, if you enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, MMA Outlaw TV on all 3 of them, and I'll catch you guys on the next week's episode. Peace.